This meeting to order now. Thank you for your presence. It looks like we have about 70 this morning already on the call. I would like to ask each of you as you address the board to please identify yourself, your name and your title and the institution you come from. Thank you very much. Nicole, are you with me?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
I would like to ask Ms. Abernathy if she would to call the roll, see if we have a quorum.
Yes, sir. Dr. Jim Carr,
Here.
Al Brodell,
Here.
Chris Gillum, Kevin Anderson,
Here.
Bill Clary,
Here.
Lori Griffin,
Here.
Chad Hooten.
Chad just called me and said he'd be just a few minutes late.
Okay. Andy McNeil, Greg Revels, Dr. Michael Stanton. I do believe that Greg Revels and Andy McNeil are going to be joining us, but currently we have 6 of the 10, so we do have a quorum.
I am here. It's
Okay.
Greg Revel.
I'm here too, Nicole. I don't know if you heard me, but
Dr. Stanton's here.
Stanton.
Yes.
yes.
Okay, perfect. We have 8 of 10. We have a quorum.
Good. Thank you so much for being on the call today, and appreciate Nicole. What a great job she does in organizing our meetings. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to the Finance Committee and ask Mr. Anderson to take charge.
Thank you, Dr. Carr. First, just a reminder that if you have any, might silence your phones or anything to limit the background noise is appreciated. The first item on the finance agenda is item number 9, is the annual higher education financial condition report. It begins on page 9.1 of the agenda book. Mr. Nick Fuller, floor is yours.
Good morning. Thank you. This item is just an informational item that we report to you once a year on the financial conditions of the higher ed institutions. It describes challenges experienced by those public institutions and addresses the productivity-based funding, comparison of faculty salaries, tuition and fees, fund balances, institutional scholarship expenses, and athletic expenses. So on the next few slides are just some recaps of different data that is in that financial conditions report that should be included in the agenda book that was sent to you all. So the first slide is the faculty salaries at the public 4-year universities. This is data from 2019, which is the most recent information we have from SREB. As you can see, the average salary in Arkansas is $70,363, which is at the bottom of the SREB states. For the 2-year colleges for the same year, Arkansas's average is $45,103, which is next to last in the SREB region. The next slide is a comparison of change in fund balance in funds of revenue per FTE in comparison for other SREB states. On the university side, from comparison from the 5-year change from 13 to 2018. See, Arkansas is around a little over, it's right at 7%, which is also next to last in the 5-year change, but it is a positive increase. On the 2-year side, we are, I think it was closer to 36%, which is number 2 in change in revenue on the college side. For tuition and fees, we have been able to keep those increases fairly low on the passing the cost on to students due to the addition of around $16 million in state funding the governor and the legislature have added over the past few years. But even with these efforts to keep costs down, the change in tuition and fees from the fiscal year 1920 to fiscal year 2021, the average was 0.7% increase for 4 years and 0.4% increase at the 2-year institutions. And the latest available data there in the red from SREB, that has not been updated in, as you can see, about 2 years. So we're kind of behind on getting that information on the regional and national averages. The next slide would be the tuition increase on the 4-year side. As you can see, the total 1-year increase was the 0.7, and over 5 years, we've increased 17.5%, an average increase of 3.2. For the 2-year institutions on the next slide, the 1-year increase was 0.4. Over 5 years, we've increased tuition and fees 15.3%, with an average increase each year over those 5 years of 2.9. The next topic will be discussing fund balances, and industry standards for average fund balance it should be between 5% and 14% of educational and general operating budget. For 1920, all but 2 of the 4-year institutions were above this 5% mark. For 1920, no 2-year institution was below 5%. You can see on the 4-year, the 2 institutions that were below this percentage were Henderson State and SAU and Magnolia. And the 2-year side, everyone has shown an increase there, and you can see that the one institution that was consistently below this mark in prior years had a major change this year at ASU 3 Rivers and was able to get back onto the positive side. The next topic is the institutional scholarships. We did have a late revision on one institution on this, so it does not reflect the same as in your agenda book. But as a total, there were 17,999 scholarships awarded at 4-year institutions. The total cost of $72.9 million. And this is compared to 16,659 at a cost of $68.6 million the previous year. So scholarships as a percentage of total tuition and fees were 9.2%. It's a slight increase over the 8.9% from the previous year. And the chart on the slide shows the breakout of all of those between the academic and performance scholarships in comparison to total tuition and fee income. And you'll see the revision that was updated from what was in your agenda book is on the Henderson State line, if you want to see what that change was. We had an update to their awards and award amounts. And other thoughts, this was mentioned and we talked about in a prior board meeting about the capital funding. The facilities audit program reports replacement value of $5.5 billion for facilities throughout institutions, with maintenance needs of $2.95 billion in deferred maintenance and $259 million of critical maintenance, still without a steady source of income to be able to fund those maintenance needs. And final recommendations from ADHE staff is to continue to work with institutions to refine the productivity model, ensure we're meeting needs of students and the institutions, and to work with legislature toward aligning institutional policies, state funding policies, and tuition policies in a way to prioritize higher education affordability. I believe that is the recap of this report. Are there any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Fuller?
Nick, this is Bill Clary. Is there anything that sticks out as far as, like potential financial distress type situation going on or anything in any of these?
Not currently. Obviously we have the situation that is still being corrected at Henderson that everyone knows about, but I don't see anything that stands out anywhere else yet. There are some bills going through the legislative session now to add some additional financial reporting to us as well as the legislature that might help kind of help us keep an eye on things to see if any situations arise, but nothing stands out currently.
All right, thank you.
Other questions? Nick, I guess when I read through this report, I'm certainly not saying I disagree with a lot of the conclusions or the data. And I think it's a pretty decent snapshot in time of where we have been, I guess, or where we are now. I guess what I didn't see, or what I'm concerned about, is the going forward. Just enrollment in general, how the classroom's going to look. I think the whole COVID situation has given us a look at what some of that may be, and what the financial consequences of those things are on the institutions. I mean, I know the demographics alone show that there's just not going to be as many people graduating from high school, therefore less potential students. And so I'm wondering what the financial impact is, and maybe that's a different report, but really, again, our job as the higher ed coordinating board, should we be helping to look at what the future is going to look like and help guide a little bit along those lines?
I think a lot of that information, I know it's not going to help in the short term, but we'll be able to see more of that in the next year's report, because all of this data is from the year that ended June 30. So we were only a couple of months into the pandemic at that point. So we didn't really know the impact on everything at the time we were looking at all of this data. So we won't, the next time we collect the data from this fiscal year, we'll be able to see more of that impact and be able to know what adjustments, might need to be implemented long term.
So along those lines, just some suggestions as we put together the next report, and maybe sooner than later in terms of addressing some of these issues. I know the colleges and universities have to do this directly. We're there to help support.
Sure.
But like, for instance, repurposing our existing resources, specifically facilities, versus new construction. I mean, you got to look pretty hard at any, if I'm a college university president, I'm looking pretty hard at whether I'm going to spend any money on brick and mortar versus how the environment, relative to how the environment is changing. Programs, one of our jobs is to oversee each college as they put on a new program or take them off. Is there overlap? Is there, and I think, again, if I'm a college president, I'm looking pretty hard at streamlining a lot of my programs. And in the age of the technical advances and online learning, are there going to be some overlaps now that weren't there because of geography before? And does that change the paradigm as far as how we as a board look at adding these new programs? I think that's key. And then I also think there needs to be a hard look at these financial challenges that their colleges are going to face. I got to take a hard look at some of these athletic programs that are draining resources. I mean, can you justify them at some, in some of these situations? Those are just some things I think we need to look at. Each university's got to make up their own mind. But certainly, hopefully, we can provide some guidance.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Anderson, I agree with you totally. Thank you for those comments.
Yeah, so do I, 100%.
Are there any other questions for Nick? All right, hearing no other questions. Do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. That passes. All right. The next item is agenda item number 10. It's the maintenance report. It begins on page 10.1 of the agenda book. Mr. Fuller.
Sir, this is an annual report that ADHE staff provides to the coordinating board for any newly constructed or purchased facilities, anything that was approved over the past year. Gives you an update on the maintenance of those new facilities. And also a report on each new facility that was approved over the year, the amounts that are being put back for the maintenance that we've talked about in each of those loan feasibilities. You know, if they're constructing, they have to have a certain amount set back for maintenance of those buildings. So this is just another informational report that the board had asked starting back in 2010, and we've reported to you each year. And all of those items that are currently in process are listed in your agenda book for your information. It will be open to any questions anyone has on any of those projects.
Any questions for Mr. Fuller?
Mr. Anderson, this is Al. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
I just had a couple questions for Mr. Fuller. Just as a refresher for my memory, the putting back anything applies to construction past a certain date. So we do have some facilities out there that this was not done for. Am I correct in saying that?
Yes, sir. I don't remember the exact date when that started, but you are correct that there may have been buildings prior to that issues were made that weren't required to have anything put back for maintenance.
And then in addition to that, we had a lengthy discussion about what is maintenance and what falls under routine maintenance versus major repairs that some people may consider maintenance, like HVAC.
Yes, sir.
Like boilers, chillers, stuff like that.
Right.
It seems like this conversation, I hate to harp on it, we bring this up every time we see this report or every time there's an issue that falls outside of maintenance. But can you give us any idea of those repairs that are outside of maintenance, what our institutions are doing to prepare for those type capital expenditures that we've seen become issues in the past?
I don't know that there's any one way that they're preparing for it. You know, I know there's an institution on the agenda today for a loan feasibility that they're requesting the sustainable building loan to replace, you know, a chiller at one of their dorm buildings, things like that. So they're looking at, you know, this sustainable thing that's supposed to be more energy efficient, be able to pay the loan back from the savings from the energy efficiencies rather than other revenues. So I know, you know, some aspects looking at that, other not traditional ways of getting this funding or a lot of things, but I don't know that there's any one standard of how schools are preparing for that.
Just a quick follow-up. I know in the past we've had conversations as to the dollar amount. Do we feel that this dollar amount per square foot is sufficient to sustain the maintenance? And have we given any consideration to increasing that and then also expanding the definition of maintenance to help plan for that in the future?
I don't know that any thought has been given on it at this point. I can look at the current definition for you, and, you know, I can bring that to you maybe the next board meeting, looking at a revision of the definition for you all to approve that, and we can look at the rates on that, see if an increase needs to be approved from you on that as well for any feasibilities going forward.
I'm certainly no expert in this field, but I know those conversations have come up year after year for at least the last couple of years, and so I'd love to at least throw it out there that if the price per square foot's not enough, or we aren't applying that to a broader sense of maintenance, that instead of having it come up with continued loans for replacement, can we plan for that as we put the building in, pressing forward with
Yes, sir.
some change.
We can definitely look at reviewing that and bring it to you at the next meeting for a review to see if you.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Al. Good questions. Any other questions on this report? Hearing no other questions, that report will be, without objection, that report will be accepted. Moving on to agenda item number 11. This is the economic feasibility of loan issue for the University of Arkansas Community College at Hope, Texarkana. It begins on page 11:1 of the agenda book. Mr. Fuller.
And I'll let you know that the institution has requested this item be pulled down and held over for another board meeting. They're going to have another feasibility request that's in coordination with this, so they want to bring them at the same time because they'll both be related to the same project.
Okay, so pulling that one from the agenda, let's move on to item number 11. This is the economic feasibility of a bond issue for the University of Arkansas for medical sciences. Mr. Fuller.
This loan issues request for $168 million with a term of 30 years at a rate not to exceed 4.5%. This is going to be for auxiliary purposes and be funded through auxiliary revenues from UAMS. This loan issue will be used for various facilities on the UAMS campus, including a radiation oncology center and a surgical annex. The information that the school has sent to us, they do have the funding to cover this information, and there are representatives from the institution should be available if there are any questions on this issue.
Questions? Hearing no questions, do I hear a motion to recommend approval?
So moved.
Dr. Carr, and there's a second. Any discussion?
Second.
Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing no opposition, that will stand approved. The next item is item number 13. This is the economic feasibility of loan for Henderson State University. It begins on page 13:1 of the agenda book. Nick, take it away.
This request, as I mentioned before, this is the one from the Sustainable Building Loan Fund request. This is for a loan of $1 million for a term of 10 years at a rate not to exceed 0%. It is a state issued loan from the State Division of Building Authority. And this will be for educational, general, and auxiliary purposes. It'll be from tuition and fee and housing revenue to be able to pay the loan. Proceeds will be used to replace the roof on the portion of the Huey Library, replace a failing chiller in the Newberry Residence Hall, and to replace HVAC units on top of the Wells Gym. And representatives from the institution are available to answer any questions as well.
Questions?
I have a question.
Go ahead,
Can you
Greg.
hear me?
Yes.
Sir.
It's Greg Revels. When you look at the data there, it says that their proposed new debt service is $25,000. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, it's the new debt service on this would be the $1 million spread out over the 10 years. So that the yearly debt service would be $25,000.
Well, $1 million divided by 10 years is not 25,000.
Well, you're correct. Let me look at it. Oh,
Should be 100, shouldn't it?
If you look on the next page, the auxiliary portion has the 75,000.
I got you. Okay, thank you.
Yes, I'm sorry. That's the tuition and fee portion of it, and the auxiliary revenue is on the second page.
Thanks, Nick.
I do try to do math sometimes.
Yeah, me too. And I usually screw up when I do it in my head.
It's a good thing we have a CPA on the board who watches these things. That's a
Right.
good thing. Any other questions? Hearing
Yeah, I
no-
got one. I just
Yep.
got one more question,
Sure.
Kevin. So we know what the situation with Henderson is, and I know they've got to do these things, but are we watching this closely to make sure that they're where they need to be financially moving forward on a continuing basis, or is that something that we don't do that Arkansas State's doing? I just don't want to get in a big old hole with them.
Sure. Yeah, and I'm sure that Arkansas State, the system is looking at it more closely than we are. But yes, we are still keeping an eye on the situation and making sure that we're not digging a hole any worse than it was.
Okay.
Nick, I could jump in here if you'd like. Greg, this is
Yes,
Chuck
sir.
Welch from the AHECB.
By all means.
And I can assure you that we are looking at it daily. We have developed short and long-term plans for both the debt, for accounts payable, and all those things. And as I've said many times in public settings, we are far better off than we were 1 year ago. But this is a multi-year turnaround plan. I mean, it's not something that we're going to be able to do overnight. But absolutely, we are looking at it on a weekly, if not daily basis, and ensuring. And one of the big challenges they had was with having one of the oldest campuses in the state were some of these critical maintenance opportunities. And so we're looking at multiple strategies to try to address that, including obviously a no interest loan, but to try to prevent those major fluctuations within each operating year that we had been dealing with, or the campus had been dealing with. So this is certainly all part of that grand strategy.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You got
With that being said, I'll make a motion that we approve this.
Okay, there's a motion to approve. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any
Aye.
opposed? Any opposed? Hearing none, that will stand approved. And that is the last item on the agenda. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
So
No
moved.
objection. Hearing no objection, we stand adjourned. Dr. Carr?